Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome. Whether it's evening, morning, or something else, wherever you are in the world, we thank you very much for joining us. I'm Robin Ewing, and I'm the co-director of the Create Centre with Michael Anderson, and we're both very excited about tonight's presentation. Before we start, though, we'd like to pay our respects and acknowledge our First Nations Australians, our original storytellers, our original artists. We'd like to acknowledge that for our First Nations Australians, the arts and creativity and story are at the centre of their doing and knowing and being and becoming. And we have so much to learn from the way they do things. I'm on Darug country, and Michael is on in the country of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, where Sydney University is built. Wherever we are in Australia, we want to acknowledge that Aboriginal land was never ceded. Always was, always will be Aboriginal land. Just to say a very brief introduction to the Create Centre, if you don't know much about the Create Centre. Create stands for Creativity in Research, Engaging the Arts, Transforming Education, Health and Wellbeing. And our presentation tonight is really addressing the way that these important parts of who we are and our lives are now being implemented in a really explicit way in the Welsh curriculum. So the presentation tonight speaks very much to Create's remit. But I'm going to hand over to Michael now, who's going to introduce our wonderful presenters for the evening. Thanks, Michael.
Thanks, Robin, and thanks everyone who's joined us this evening from all around Australia and some Welsh participants as well. It's a special welcome to our Welsh friends. Thank you so much for coming and joining us tonight or your morning, and welcome to everyone who's watching this on the video replay. This has kind of been one of my dream webinars. I've been so excited about hearing about how an education system can actually do something that actually puts the arts in focus and allows the arts to be seen for the powerful force for learning that it is. And so I'm kind of so excited. I'll have to shut up in a minute because I'll just talk for the whole time about how wonderful this is. But we approached our colleagues in Wales to talk about this work, and they enthusiastically said they'd love to. So I'm so pleased to welcome Dan Allen, who's the Program Manager for Creative Learning Through the Arts, Sian James, who's Program Manager for Creative Learning Through the Arts as well, and Rhiann Jones, who's Head Teacher at a school that I'm not even going to try and pronounce, but Rhiann, I'm sure you can nail it for us. But thank you so much for joining us. And we're going to hand over to Dan, Rhiann and Sian to speak about this wonderful work, and then there'll be about 15 minutes for questions at the end. If you want to pop questions or comments into the chat as we go, feel free to do so, and we'll pick that up at the end. But welcome our Welsh arts education superheroes. Really excited to hear what you've got in store for us this evening.
Great. Well, thanks very much, Michael, and congratulations on the pronunciation of all of our names. You did brilliantly. So thank you. We're delighted to be here, and thank you ever so much for the invite. I don't think we need to kind of say any more about who we are. Michael's already done a great job of that. So we're going to share a presentation with you this morning. I say this morning, it's 8 o'clock in the morning over in the UK. I know it's a slightly different time for you over there or wherever you are in the world, but yet we do have a story to share with you this morning, and it is very much about creativity and how a curriculum reform in Wales actually at the moment is really putting creativity at the heart of education. So we're going to talk to you a little bit about that. We're going to talk about us as a programme and how we sit within the context of that reform and curriculum design. Rhian's going to talk a little bit about what that looks like in practice, in a setting. So we'll be sharing some real life examples with you. And then we want to talk about some of the successes and the impact that this programme has been having. And of course, there will be an opportunity, as Michael said, for us to take any questions that you might have or would like to ask us at the end. So we're really happy to be here. My colleague Dan is going to be driving the presentation. I use the term driving all the time, but he's in control. And we're going to just kick off really by sharing a short film with you, which we hope gives you a real kind of flavour really of what the work is about we do here in Wales. So I hope you enjoy this one. Thanks, Dan.
I think if you can connect a young person with their own creativity, the world opens up in the most magical way.
Imagine a nation that puts creativity at the heart of learning. Imagine a curriculum that uses the arts to promote learning in areas as diverse as maths, science, literacy and well-being.
Creativity is at the heart of learning. And learning is the most wonderful thing that human beings have ever invented. It is at the heart of being a human being. It's what differentiates us from the rest of the natural world, and it's magical.
The old model of learning and teaching, where teacher instructs pupil top down, you do what I tell you, is not going to create the learners that we need for the future. So for the well-being of society and for its prosperity, we need different kinds of learners. And creative learning through the arts is all about developing those. And the great news is that it works.
Times are changing, schools are changing, the kind of things we want from schools are different. We want young people to be more creative, to be better critical thinkers, to be able to work with others. Not just me saying that, the World Economic Forum is saying that, the OECD is saying that, UNESCO is saying that, employers up and down the land are saying that. These kind of skills are what employers want and what society needs.
This programme assists us with delivering on what I call our national mission. That national mission is to raise standards in our schools, close the attainment gap and ensure that we have an education system in Wales that is a source of national pride.
Where programmes like this happen across the world, we tend to see a number of things. We see high levels of student engagement, high levels of student well-being, kids saying they are happier, more in tune with what's going on. We see re-energised teachers. We see a greater attention to the quality of teaching and learning. All of these things are going to improve the quality of education.
Creative Learning Through the Arts is a programme which is designed to appeal to a wide range of schools, from primary to secondary. But we've noticed particularly those schools that have particular challenges. By bringing in creative specialists who can talk to the school, diagnose those problems and come up with new and creative solutions, we've been seeing some very interesting projects that have really got to the heart of some of those persistent and difficult issues that some schools have to deal with.
Over 1,200 schools across Wales have had access to these wonderful opportunities over a 5-year period. I think it's also really important because it is supporting the delivery of the new curriculum in Wales, and that's so exciting to see the arts and culture actually central to the development of a new curriculum in a country like Wales.
The new curriculum in Wales is very ambitious in the kind of learners that it wants to create. We want to have young people who are enterprising and creative contributors in society. And so Creative learning through the arts just sings about that completely.
It's a really varied programme that allows us to match practitioners of the arts with individual schools to work on specific projects, through to our opportunity to allow schools to bid for funding to visit a museum, to visit a live performance, to be able to experience music, dance, sculpture, or simply a trip to the theatre. So it's a really wide programme that allows children to be able to develop their creativity, to find new ways into areas of learning, and to experience something that perhaps they wouldn't normally get to do.
I think what's really important, it's not just what the figures tell us, it's actually what school teachers, parents and school leaders are telling us, that this programme is really important in helping schools to allow children to achieve their potential.
It worked because schools bought into it. I mean, I think this is the most significant thing. You know, hundreds of thousands of children and thousands of teachers have been involved in this programme, and that's amazing. So to be able to reach out to so many in a systematic way, in the way the Welsh have managed to do, is really extraordinary.
What's really gratifying to me is to see other countries from around the world beginning to look at our approach to creative learning through the arts here in Wales, and Wales beginning to be at the forefront of this agenda, and other countries wanting to learn from us.
Okay, so just to give you a little bit of context, the current curriculum that we are moving away from in Wales was actually devised in 1988, and to help you think about that time, if some of you perhaps weren't even born, 1988 was a time when we were using floppy disks to store data, the year that the first cell phone was launched, and the year after that, Australia got the internet for the first time. So that was the time when the curriculum that we're moving away from was devised. And over the 26 years before a review took place, bits were added onto that curriculum and it was tweaked, but there was no fundamental review. So by 2014, 2015, it was considered that it was really important that we looked at reviewing the curriculum, and decision was taken that the best way to do this was to gather evidence from around Wales through lots of consultations. Teachers, pupils, parents, governors were all consulted. Lots and lots of discussions. It was a big debate across the whole country, and widespread engagement. So, as well as wishing to gather views of all these stakeholders, it was also considered really important to draw upon international experience, upon research and good practice from around the world. So this consultation and review was held, and there was some quite clear findings, and they were that we needed to have a clear, consistent vision, that the curriculum that we had at the time was definitely overcrowded. As I said, lots and lots of bits had been added onto it as the years had gone past since 1988, that it was outdated because it didn't reflect what we needed to prepare children for the future, that it was narrow. It had a very strong focus on literacy and numeracy, and that it lacked depth and breadth in terms of preparing children for the future and giving them the health and well-being attitudes and behaviours that would be good and support them throughout their lives. So it was decided, if you could just move to the next slide, Dan, thank you. It was decided that the evidence would be used to devise a purpose-led curriculum, and the whole education system in Wales would be redesigned, which as a practitioner has been a daunting but exciting time. So the government looked at introducing schools as learning organisations. They looked at the professional standards that leadership, teachers and teaching assistants were supported by, looked at professional learning, leadership was looked and developed, additional learning needs was reviewed, the accountability and the assessment programmes were also looked at. And they throughout the whole process, the stakeholders and practitioners have been consulted, and the whole process has been very much involving widespread engagement. So we have now a new curriculum that's due for implementation fully, a statutory requirement for it to be implemented from next September 2022. We've been encouraged to start embedding that curriculum and working with it for a number of years now. So at the heart of that curriculum, we have 4 purposes, and that's to be the core of our curriculum design and development. And these 4 purposes are ambitious, capable learners, enterprising, creative contributors, ethically informed citizens, and healthy, confident individuals. And these are the dispositions that the education system in Wales and us as practitioners want to achieve for all of our learners between the ages, well, obviously all of our learners, but to have achieved those by the time they're 16. The current system isn't one continuum, it's different key stages. So the new curriculum will be a 3 to 16 continuum, which obviously is better for learners and their progress. So it's there are going to be 4 areas of learning and experience, and that is really interesting change. Previously we had programs of study, which implies there are things that we have to learn, whereas we're moved towards learning areas of learning and experience, which seems a key for us in terms of what we can provide for the children. We have cross-curricular frameworks, which are to do with literacy, numeracy and digital competency, and they are the responsibility of all practitioners within the school setting and go across all curricular areas. We have cross-cutting themes and integral competencies that we are looking to develop, and pedagogical principles, which I'll tell you a little bit more about in a little while, but they make that whole curriculum and the national framework that schools and education settings, so this also applies to early year settings, so it provides a whole national framework. Thank you, Dan. So there's 2 elements to the new curriculum. There's the national framework, which it's not over prescriptive. It has lots of flexibility in it, and it encourages schools and practitioners to develop meaningful links between different areas of curriculum and subject areas. It's very much focused on a balance between knowledge, skills and experiences, and that national programme very much focuses on realising the 4 purposes and supporting well-being of all of our learners, and also includes assessment such as looking at the progression, which will reduce our reliance upon a narrow assessment arrangements. move towards more of a holistic view and a balanced approach between quantitative and qualitative data to gather evidence of pupil progress. So that's the national framework, and then alongside that we can interpret this as practitioners on a local level. We are encouraged to work on a school level or a cluster level. So clusters of schools working together to design this curriculum and how it fits in within our local context. So we've been working, schools across Wales have been working to gather information from our stakeholders about the vision, about areas within our local context that our stakeholders feel would be beneficial for us to focus on. So for instance, looking at the culture, the geographical, physical geography, the people within our environments, nature, and the global context. And that's a move away from predetermined topics and much more linked to the learners themselves and what they want to find out about and what they want to learn about. So there's a huge emphasis upon collaboration and cooperation now. We've moved away from a high stakes culture, and schools are expected to be working together to support one another and to devise this new curriculum. And this reinforces professional partnerships, encourages professional discussion, reflection, and helps us develop a self-improving system where we share and we develop together. So I think I've got another slot later on where I'll be able to tell you a little bit about what this means in practice and how some schools have been implementing the new curriculum.
That's great. Thanks, Rhian. So I'm going to talk a little bit now about our programme in Wales and really how that has supported the development of the new curriculum. And here you can see what our vision is on the screen, and while you read that to yourselves, I'll just very, very quickly say that in terms of the context of the numbers of schools in Wales, there's just under 1,500 schools across Wales, and we have a mixture of primary schools, secondary schools, special schools, and obviously being a bilingual nation, we have a mixture of English medium schools and Welsh medium schools. Also, our target actually when we first embarked on this journey was to reach a third of the schools in Wales. So you're looking at something around the 500 schools mark. I'm delighted to say that we have actually exceeded that by quite a number, and we'll be able to talk to you a little bit more about the kind of numbers of schools we've engaged with, but it is around the 84% mark, to be honest, in terms of school engagement with the programme. Next slide, please, Dan. So this is all about Lead Creative Schools specifically. Rhian has been on that journey and she's going to talk to you a little bit about that later on. The Lead Creative Schools scheme really is the main building block of this programme, and this slide sort of tells you what it's all about. Just to share a little bit with you on how we got there, that this kind of really adds to what Rhian has said. But, you know, this programme was launched at a similar time to Successful Futures, was that independent review was carried out by Professor Graham Donaldson, which really looked at curriculum and assessment arrangements in Wales. And luckily, conveniently, whichever word you want to choose, our programme has run alongside that and has been really seen as a support mechanism for schools interested in developing creative learning pedagogy. And it was this initial phase, really, of curriculum reform that saw what we call a pioneer network of schools. And these were charged with designing and developing the framework of the new curriculum through the creation of what matters statements and progression steps. Now, these were designed in collaboration with curriculum experts, underpinned by the 4 core purposes that you just heard about. The areas of learning and experience, with literacy, numeracy and digital competency integrated throughout Many of these pioneer schools actually engaged with the Lead Creative School scheme very early on, and they saw this as a way of experimenting with alternative curriculum approaches. And as teachers were beginning to experiment, the scheme was offering them an opportunity to collaborate with creative professionals and really explore creative approaches to teaching and learning. And as you can see from our vision here, well, just like the previous slide, but it's fine, Dan. The scheme is about developing creativity, creative skills in how our pupils learn and how our teachers teach. The heart of it, co-construction, co-delivery, pupil voice is really important, as is pupil decision making, and is all centered around inquiry-based learning. Next slide, please, Dan. So yes, we've seen a wealth of projects, and they have all delivered improvements in learner outcomes, and these have ranged from engagement, motivation and aspiration right through to attainment. And it's the moving away from traditional arts projects, if you like, that focus on artistic outcomes, has seen teachers with curriculum expertise collaborate with creative professionals and their creative skills to focus on the process of learning. Next slide, please, Dan. So what we see all of the time is learners, teachers, and creative professionals working together to design and implement these projects. And it really is this collaborative process that encourages an environment where learners can ask questions, leading then to learners being more involved in decision-making and really bringing curriculum to life. The scheme provides teachers with the opportunity to reflect on what makes good learning experiences. And our Lead Creative Schools training, which really sits alongside this scheme, is attended by all participating schools and teachers, as well as the creative professionals that take part. And really, this is all about ensuring that we develop a shared and common language that is created around creativity in the classroom. So there's that real understanding of what we mean by creativity when schools begin to think about their curriculum design. And speaking of creativity, the next slide, please, Dan. Here's how we define it. So we define it as a habit of mind. And we use the model that was developed by Guy Claxton, Bill Lucas, and Ellen Spencer at the Centre for Real World Learning at Winchester University. You will have heard from Bill in that opening video that we shared with you. And we see creativity as a skill that isn't bound within the arts, that can be nurtured. And as I'm sure you know and will undoubtedly agree, creativity brings with it the ability to question, to make connections, innovate, problem solve, communicate, collaborate, reflect critically. And these areas are all skills that young people will need if they are to take responsibility of their own learning, which is ultimately what we're trying to achieve. It's these skills also that enable them to adapt, to manage and change, and are skills that are demanded by today's employers. There's no doubt about that. But above all, creative learning empowers young people to imagine how the world could be different, and gives them the confidence and motivation to make positive change happen. Next slide, please, Dan. So in developing and implementing the programme, we at the Arts Council, in partnership with our partners at Welsh Government, we sought the expertise of an organisation called Creativity, Culture and Education. You also heard from some colleagues from that organisation in the beginning of this presentation. And they invested heavily in research and looked into the bonnet of what was happening in classrooms and learning environments. And what emerged was this, what you see in front of you now, which is high functioning classroom. And this is when we believe that learning, regardless of its content, is at its very best. Now, we're not saying that low function is always bad. We're not saying that at all. Many education systems are built on this model, and some perform very well in international tests. But this environment doesn't appeal to all learners. I think we have to accept the fact that different learners learn in different ways. And so teachers need to be able to move across these two domains, if you like. And that's what we're seeing teachers doing in Wales now. So what we need sort of learning experience to be more responsive to the needs of learners. And so our approach really is to try to move schools and the creative and cultural projects that we have into that right-hand column. So schools located here, they remain structured with clear systems for monitoring, evaluation and reflection, but they are far more empathetic. And in such schools, there is a greater focus on personalisation. Pupils are more independent and they are more confident. Teaching is sort of structured in such a way as to fully engage pupils, and these are considered to be high-functioning, high-system schools. But for this to have an impact on our schools, this way of working needs to be adopted by teachers, and this requires teachers to focus more on processes rather than on outcomes, on the way the school is organised and the way that teachers teach rather than test results. So how do we achieve this? Well, we know that when high-functioning processes are in place, this leads to an increase in engagement, well-being and confidence. And we know also that in turn, that leads to an increase in attainment. I'm now going to hand over to Dan, who's going to share another little short film with you that looks at a little bit of this in practice. Thanks, Dan.
Thanks, Sian. So yeah, it's a chance to really have a look at a short case study film now from a secondary school who participated in the scheme and documented their project at 3 different stages. Just to give you a little bit of context about the school, it's a suburban school located in the city of Swansea, working with a class of Year 9 learners, so about 13, 14-year-olds. They had the inquiry question of how can we enhance levels of confidence and resilience and improve outcomes of our Year 9 science students by sharing creative approaches to learning. So the project focused on learning about the human body and was a collaboration between the science and PE departments. And Rian spoke earlier about using a localized curriculum and using what's around you in the area. In this particular project, they made visits to a local hospital to work with to see a surgeon and prosthetic limb specialist. They also managed to visit the Ospreys rugby team training session to watch and speak with creative professionals that monitor performance. And so as part of the project, they did a lot of work with making models and drawing, and they also worked with a beatboxer and rapper to develop music to demonstrate their understanding of the human body.
We're hoping to achieve quite a lot. So we're looking for sort of multifaceted sort of outcomes. We're looking to increase sort of academic application.
I'm hoping to see the confidence of the pupils increasing and their resilience so that they're prepared to try out some new things. And the main thing is to get the pupils excited and enjoying science.
I'm Lee, I'm the creative agent on this project. So my job is to work with the school, initially with the kids, to look at what they would like to do and how they would like to do it. And from that then recruit some creative practitioners who can help the school work with the curriculum to make it creative and exciting.
I'm most excited about seeing the pupils progress, looking at where they are now and where they're going to be by the end of the project.
The idea is that we can be creative in the classroom again, that we can take the ideas that we learn in the process and then share them with the staff and encourage the staff to use processes that are probably different, that are outside their comfort zone. And I think we've had a really good start so far.
The pupils seem to be working out their ideas, and we are coming to some level of fruition as the project moves through over the last month or so.
This project is really about looking at how we learn and creative ways of learning. That, I think, is the interesting phase for the project as a whole, and particularly for the school with a view to looking at how they learn from the experience.
To work with these kids to basically teach beatboxing, rap, looping and hip-hop production and so on, through teaching science through these creative art forms.
We're learning about the immune system and the skeletal system. It's like all the bones in your bodies. We're making a song about it.
The kids are really knuckling down and getting some great pieces of music going.
I think it helps us more because it's not like a classroom, and in the creative schools it's just like giving you an opportunity to do things on your own.
I'm learning as an individual within school that ownership of learning then is something that possibly we don't give them enough of in school, and this project is giving them that level of ownership, and that hopefully they'll be able to take that with them, you know, as they go forward.
It's been interesting. You never know where these projects take you, to be honest. I feel that we are going to get something good by the end of it.
So what's happening today is basically we're looking at the outcomes. So we're looking at a celebration of the process. We're going to formulate a kind of exhibition style show for the children to come and the pupils to come and see what they've done, and to sort of have a little reflection on the process they've been through visual media. So there's going to be some movies, there's going to be some still images, so they can think back on what they've done and hopefully sort of reflect on the skills that they've learned on the journey.
Some of the things we've done, it can make you think differently and take on projects differently, because I wouldn't have thought to do like make people out of plastic and things like that.
The skills are clearly on show. The kids have become more resilient, more independent, and there's been a level of maturity in the group. You know, the pupils I meet now are different to the pupils I was discussing this project with at the beginning. They were almost always engaged, they were almost always happy, the smiles on their face, and those who weren't, who didn't see the relevance, you know, as we went through, they made mature choices, and they decided that they needed the chalk and talk, that was the way that they responded better. But they did it, they pulled away from the project under mutual agreement. It was more of a, this isn't working for me, that's part of what I want. You know, I want kids to make their own choices.
We've kind of like learned how to work as a team and come up with ideas together, which is pretty good to see actually.
When we look at what the children have said in reflection and what we've actually got as a product, which is a view of the process, maybe not an outcome in itself, but a view of the process, you know, I think it's almost been, for most of our pupils, it's been an entirely positive experience.
And Rhian is now going to talk a little bit about her school's experience of the programme, focusing on how it has supported their curriculum planning.
Thank you, Dan. Yeah, just to tell you a little bit about how we feel that the Lead Creative Schools project has supported us in our curriculum reform journey and development of pedagogy. So I am head teacher from a small village school in North Wales, in Denbighshire, only 150 pupils. It's primary school, so we've got learners aged 3 to 11. And we were in a place where we felt that the curriculum was very much overburdened in the 2014, 2015. We felt it was a very narrow curriculum, and that didn't fit well with me professionally. It didn't feel that we were putting the learners and their progress at the heart of what we were doing, and we were very much driven by the high stakes culture and meeting targets and being competitive, which I think led to quite a stressful environment within schools for the staff and for the learners to some degree. And so we were very much ready for change. And so in 2016, we saw that the Lead Creative Schools project was available for us to apply to join, which we did. And we were the first cohorts to participate in the project. And we had some very exciting initiatives that were run. We worked with a film producer, and we worked with digital animator and a storyteller. We worked with musicians, and we led some very exciting and innovative projects that they were very engaging for staff and the learners. So as part of our Lead Creative Projects the process, we had to look at evaluating each initiative that we undertook. And the things that we found were that there were very high levels of engagement. The children, as you can see on the screen, they felt challenged by the process. They developed much greater levels of technical knowledge, and we also saw that they could transfer some of those skills into the other aspects of their learning. So learners had been very involved in the planning. Pupil voice was a very strong element of the Lead Creative Schools projects that we've been engaged in, and the children had worked very effectively together and collaborated well. Their independence had been developed through active learning, hands-on learning, investigative work, which again added to their engagement and their interest in what they'd been doing. And we also found that they responded really well to the unexpected. We'd planned a community event and the practitioner couldn't come, and the children stepped in and in 2 days, they planned a whole event that their skills to respond to what was needed was remarkable. So the project also gave them time to space and to reflect upon their learning, which was a really positive feature. And more than anything, it was also fun. It was fun for the learners and fun for the staff to engage in. So we were very, at the same time, as Shan mentioned earlier, the new curriculum, the consultations for the new curriculum in Wales were coming out, and we were asked to start to consider what we as a school felt what strong practice was already going on, what we felt we needed to build upon for our learners within our setting. So within my setting particularly, we have quite a high level of deprivation, a very mixed catchment area. We have high levels of transience, so that's quite disruptive to some children's learning. My school's in an area where there's quite a high level of social housing, which and we also have high levels of English as an additional language. And so we started to work as a team, a staff team, to identify the areas that we wanted to focus on when the new curriculum was designed. And the things we came up with were, we wanted the children to be engaged in their learning, we wanted them to be challenged, we wanted them to have good technical knowledge, we wanted them to be strong people agency and pupil voice. Collaboration was a key feature of what we said, and so on, as you can see from the screen. So it was at that point we realized, it took a little while, but we realized that the Lead Creative School work that we've been doing actually correlated really, really well with what we wanted to achieve as part of the new curriculum. If Dan wouldn't mind moving to the next screen. So we were looking for how we could make this visual, how we could make it tangible, and how we could embed it as rather than just a project or a series of projects working with practitioners, which wasn't necessarily sustainable over the long term, how we could really embed this at the heart of our work at Ysgol y Faenol. So we looked at the Creative Habits of Mind wheel, and we looked at the high functioning classrooms model. And we realized that this was a key tools really to help us to make it tangible, to make it visual, and to put them at the heart of our curriculum. So we looked at, we put this into our planning, we put it up on all the walls around the school and tried to encourage it to be embedded in our school life. As the new curriculum was developed by the government, the national framework, The 4 purposes we realised fitted in very effectively with the creative habits of mind. The integral skills, which are part of the new curriculum, which include things like critical thinking, problem solving, personal effectiveness, creativity and innovation, also fitted so well with this creative habits of mind wheel and the high functioning classrooms. We also, as part of the new curriculum in with Wales, have pedagogical principles to follow, and they include things like authentic context, collaboration, making connections, which again was very strong link with the Lead Creative Schools programme. So we felt that putting this at the heart of our curriculum helped us to develop huge enthusiasm for learning with our pupils, greater pupil voice and agency. They became much more inquisitive, involved in deeper questioning, challenging, and being inquisitive. We introduced inquiry-based learning, following on from the really positive experiences as part of the Lead Creative Schools programme. We focused on growth mindset, on developing imagination, developing tinkering, and what we wanted to do was to develop the children's thinkers so that they would become really focused on the process rather than the end product. As I personally worked as part of the Lead Creative Schools programme, I became more familiar with the creative habits of mind. I realised that I was actually a creative person, or am a creative person, which I hadn't realised previously, but I realised that I do challenge assumptions, that I do wonder and question, that I do play with possibilities, and the things are on the wheel. And I felt quite empowered by that. And it was at that point that I, as the leader of the schools, started to realise that not only could this be used as a tool to support learning, but that it could also be used as a tool to support the pedagogy. And as the aspects of the new curriculum were developed, the professional standards, we piloted those as a school in 2017, and we realised that a lot of elements of those standards, leadership, innovation, collaboration, were also could be developed through the creative habits of mind. So we looked at how we could implement it. We put it at the heart of our planning, but also looked at how it could be used as a pedagogical tool. Thank you, Dan. So very much, we had spent many years working under a narrow curriculum, and although staff had fully engaged in the Lead Creative Schools project, there was a sense that people would perhaps revert back to what they were familiar with, quite a narrow curriculum, and because they were worried about high stakes culture. And so what we wanted to do was to embrace the new curriculum. We needed to change the culture and empower the staff to try new things, to risk take, to be innovative, to investigate, to be inquisitive themselves, and so on. And so we looked at and to be inspired. So we looked at changing our professional learning. We looked at, we've explored lots of different creative models and used that and inspirational speakers to do with creativity when we've been planning professional learning experiences. We put the habits of mind and the high functioning classrooms models at the heart of our planning. We've introduced them into the assessment process within the school. And this has been really positive for staff. It's really empowered them. A quote from one of my teachers was, "You can try innovative teaching methods without the fear of things not going as planned. If things don't go as planned, we just reflect as a team and work together to improve future teaching and learning. So for us as a school, the creative habits of mind, the high functioning classrooms have helped us to facilitate the new curriculum. It's led to empowerment of staff, it leads them to challenge themselves, to be confident in developing as facilitators, to encourage pupil agency, and to be able to really engage in inquiry-based learning. So it's a really exciting time for us. It's developed a huge level of enthusiasm with the staff and pupils, and it's a bit infectious, and you just want to do more of it. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Rian. So in this next section, I'm going to talk about some of the ways in which we have been able to adapt and respond to the ever-changing needs of schools and the curriculum reform process. And this has really allowed our offer to remain relevant to schools and their needs. I'll then move on to talk about some of the impacts that we're seeing as a result of the work taking place in schools, and talk a little bit more about our relationship with the Welsh Government. So as the first cohort of Lead Creative Schools were close to completing their second projects, school-to-school working was being actively encouraged as part of the reform process. And we already had some small groups of schools working collaboratively as Lead Creative Schools. And we wanted to explore how we could take this model further and adapt the direction of the reform, adapt into the direction of the reform process. So we designed a specific school-to-school support development strand as a means of empowering schools who had participated in the scheme to share their creative learning experience with a partner school, leading them through a creative learning project. And this way of working opened up a professional learning dialogue between schools, allowing them to share and learn from each other through joint planning and professional development sessions. More recently, we collaborated with the National Academy for Educational Leadership to work with a small cohort of school leaders to support them to understand the role of creativity and the importance of creative leadership within the context of the new curriculum, to help them to encourage innovation within their own setting by raising practitioner confidence to take risks and develop resilience. Prior to this piece of work, we'd observed that schools who had significant buy-in and support from senior leaders that embraced creativity tended to take their creative learning experience beyond the classrooms of participating teachers, allowing creativity to be embedded across the wider school community. Our secondary schools have often identified that working cross-curricular and across subject disciplines has presented specific challenges when participating in creative learning projects. So we created an enhanced secondary offer for schools who, it was there to develop and assist schools to further explore, develop and embed their understanding of creative learning collaboratively across different areas of learning and experience. In addition to this, a pan-Wales network of secondary schools practitioners was created to support professional learning within this context. And early reflections with those participating schools show that dialogue and curriculum planning across the areas of learning is taking place and proving to be really beneficial, something that hasn't often been done before. Time has been created to reflect and have deeper and more meaningful conversations about professional learning with creative professionals. And teachers are valuing the time to network and reflect with each other and other schools using that shared language around creativity. Building on the success of the Lead Creative School Scheme approach to curriculum design, we were asked by a working group conducting an independent review into improving and teaching the themes and experiences relating to Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities across all parts of the school curriculum to explore how our scheme could be adapted to support their work. And our strand, Cynefin, Black, Asian and minority ethnic Wales, was developed in response to this request. It is about supporting schools to work alongside creative practitioners with lived experience to devise and deliver collaborative projects relating to key themes around this important area of the curriculum. And a second cohort of schools are currently participating in this scheme. But I'm just going to play 2 short clips from a teacher and a creative practitioner discussing their experiences of their Cynefin project.
We applied at Severn Primary because we are a hugely diverse school. Over 70% of our children have English as an additional language. There are 55 different languages spoken at our school. So the point of us applying for the project was to try and encourage the children through various art forms to explore their identity and their connection to Wales.
The arts gives the kids a platform of expression. They're going to draw, some of them are going to do poems, some of them are just going to listen to the music, some are singing, some are even just talking about it. So there's so many different forms of art. So using art gives the children more abilities and more chances to really express themselves.
So I'm going to move on to discuss some of the impacts that we are seeing from schools participating in the programme, specifically the Lead Creative School Scheme. I'm quite conscious that screen is quite busy, but don't worry, I will summarise some of those quotes for you as well. Schools are consistently reporting the positive impact that the programme is having on teaching and learning. Those participating in literacy-focused creative projects have reported a significant number of learners have made progress in developing their oracy and written skills. And in projects focusing on numeracy, schools report that pupils have become more confident in their ability to apply skills to different contexts. Attitudinal changes are also regularly noted, with teachers observing positive improvement to behaviour, attendance, confidence, motivation, and even parental engagement. And the quotes on the screen are from teachers and learners identifying a range of impacts on the learners. And you can see comments there related to independent learning, developing reflection skills, greater vocabulary, developing creativity, especially their ability to collaborate, and also teachers exploring different ways to measure this progress. As well as the impact on learners, we asked teachers to reflect on the impact that this way of working has had on their own practice. And this has been really exciting to witness and has allowed teachers to think carefully and critically about their approaches to creative teaching and learning. Teachers have embraced a creative curriculum and welcomed a new way of delivering familiar skills and topics. This has included changing the environment as well as teaching styles. School timetables have become more flexible to allow children's creativity to blossom, removing endpoints and focusing on the process of learning. And again, on the screen there, you can see a small selection of quotes from teachers identifying some of the impacts that this way of working has had on them, taking those greater risks, professional dialogue with colleagues, and recognising themselves as creative individuals. What's also been interesting is seeing learners observe the changes in their teachers and their teaching style. In the initial rounds of applications, schools identified that their rationale for applying was because they recognised that the Lead Creative School Scheme was a means to try something different. And we heard that from Rian herself. At the end of the first year of the scheme, teachers were already acknowledging that creative learning projects were enabling them to address the 4 core purposes at the heart of the curriculum and see how this approach was contributing positively to their understanding of what the new curriculum could look like in the classroom. As more schools joined the scheme over subsequent years, teachers, head teachers and Welsh Government continued to grow in their recognition that the Lead Creative School Scheme is a precursor to the new curriculum, focusing on creative approaches to teaching and learning, encouraging schools to take risks and collaborate and design bespoke, authentic learning experiences. The scheme now, more than ever, is recognised as being aligned to the new curriculum, creating transformational experiences for teachers, learners and creative practitioners alike. And here we have a head teacher reflecting on her own school's experience.
Part of the Lead Creative Schools scheme has enabled us to really focus on our own pedagogy. It's enabled us to think about what we do, why we do it, the environment in which we do it, how we record it, all of those big questions really that underpin our pedagogical principles and will have a huge influence on the success or otherwise of a new curriculum. It's given opportunity for that professional dialogue to take place within the school and with a partner school, but in a very real and authentic context for ourselves as professionals, so that we are drawing on our own experiences that we've seen with the children in partnership with our creative practitioner and creative agent, so that we can really look at, well, what works, why does it work, is that sustainable, is that something that we could move forward?
One of the most significant successes that is often identified by international visitors keen to understand the operation of the programme is the collaboration between the Arts Council of Wales and Welsh Government. The partnership group of key stakeholders, including the Arts Council of Wales, Estin, the School Inspectorate, Education Consortia and the Welsh Government can steer the direction of the programme. The programme focuses on the importance of collaboration between education and art sectors, and this is mirrored in the collaborative working relationship of the partnership group, meeting regularly to ensure that the work is aligned and supports the direction of curriculum reform. So that brings us to the end of what we planned to say, but I'm sure there may be some questions that Sian, Rhian and I can respond to.
Fabulous, such a fabulous kind of demonstration of what's possible when you align researchers, practitioners, and a system, really. It's such an exciting and hopeful story, I think. And I mean, I've got 1,000 questions, but I might get Jane, if you feel like unmuting, Jane Polly, to unmute and ask your question, because it's a cracker, Jane. Off you go.
Thank you. Oh, look, I'll turn off my video. I don't know quite what's happening there. Yeah, look, this is so fascinating for me on both levels. I am a curriculum leader in the arts here in Tasmania, which is the small island state to the south of Australia. And the arts, I always find very interesting in terms of, you know, kind of being valued in a curriculum generally. So the fact you've put arts and creativity at the centre of your curriculum is just fascinating. Plus, I'm also doing a PhD where I'm looking at how curricula talk about arts. So again, this is just fantastic. So I suppose I was wondering, from your perspectives, there in Wales, has there been a change around the narrative around the arts and creativity that you've noticed where people are talking about it in a different way that actually values the arts?
Hi, Jane, thanks ever so much for that question. I'll try to answer that. And I think the honest answer is yes. There is a difference in the narrative, and I think there's lots of reasons for that. But I think one of the main reasons is around there is a greater understanding of what we mean by creativity when we talk about it. So schools, teachers alike who engage in this way of working, they understand what we mean when we talk about creativity. There's also a greater value, I think, across the board. And to pick up on your first of that question, you were talking about kind of any changes politically, and I think there is. I mean, it's unprecedented, really, the relationship that we've got at government level here in terms of their support and their level of investment in this programme. And it isn't really seen kind of anywhere else across the world, as far as I'm aware. So that is something in itself that's really important. But it's also the value that they're placing on creativity. And that's because they can see the difference that working in this way is having on, you know, creating the next generation, really, of our learners and everything that they will bring to their lives. So yes, I think is my answer to that question, and I hope that sort of answers it as well as possible. I'm not sure whether Rhian or Dan has anything they want to add to that. Yes, Rhian.
Yes, I would actually. I feel we were quite apprehensive following the lockdowns due to the COVID pandemic, and quite a strong emphasis, perhaps in the media, that we needed to catch up in terms of we thought that might be reflected within the communities. in terms of parents feeling that their children needed to be working on literacy, numeracy in a very narrow curriculum again. However, we have been reporting to parents on their development within creativity and so on over a period of years now. And recently, on the 15th of November, just a fortnight ago, I actually led a cross-cluster, so across our local cluster of schools, led a focus group for parents, and it was very well attended. And some of the questions we were asking were about the vision for the future concerning the new curriculum, and it was refreshing and exciting to hear that the parents were very much interested in the future curriculum being based on experiences, based on the holistic, the whole development of the child, on creativity, on children developing their imagination. So I think that there has been a difference in narrative, and although that's not always necessarily evident through the media, through practitioners and through parents, that's definitely evident.
Fabulous. Jane, that's such a great question, and I think so pertinent, not only for Tasmania, but for the rest of the country. Robin's got a fantastic question that kind of melds with one of my questions. So I might ask mine first, which might allow you to answer Robin's or not, but let's see what happens. We're going to wrap up at about 1:15, by the way, if anyone needs to rush off and cook dinner or breakfast or chase kids into a corner of the house. So my question is, there's a kind of a fair bit of pressure, I would imagine, on the Welsh education system to demonstrate the impact and the efficacy of this approach, because around you, you have some, what I might call fairly kind of education systems that I think have gone a bit backwards in their engagement with creativity in the arts. I won't name them, but I'm sure we can work out who we're talking about. So I wonder what measures that you've taken to think about the efficacy and the impact of this work on a qualitative, a quantitative, and empirical basis, or are we not quite there yet?
The programme is being evaluated, Michael, independently, so we are getting that narrative, we are getting the data. I think creativity is very difficult to measure, and I think that's just me being really, really honest, and I think it's something that a lot of countries are trying to grapple with at the moment in terms of how you measure that, and then how you translate that narrative sort of successfully, how it sort of comes across. But I think the best sort of positivity we can take from this really is the teachers' sort of anecdotes themselves and the difference that they're seeing in their learners. That's what they're telling us, that this is really, really making a difference, and it's about giving them the confidence to take risks and think differently and work in a different way and not be afraid if it doesn't work, think of another way, try and try again type thing, so that they haven't, and it's not driven by, Estin or Ofsted or all of that kind of sort of pressure that teachers find themselves under all of the time. It's about giving them the freedom really to explore and think differently. So, we've got, Dan shared some of the kind of impact with you in that presentation, and we've got numerous interim reports from our independent evaluators that have been working with us over the life of the programme, and actually we've got another kind of final report due to be published soon that really looks more at the narrative of this and more of the kind of sort of really in-depth kind of case studies from from teachers and learners alike, as well as practitioners and us as managers of the actual scheme and partners in terms of how we've developed this. So we'd be very happy to share any of that with you if you would find that helpful. Dan, your mic is off. You may have something you want to add.
I was going to say, I will jump in a little bit. I think one of the biggest challenges that independent evaluation has found is because each project is so unique to the particular school's context. It's how do you then compare that data of a school that's really been looking at has been looking at numeracy or perhaps pupils being able to tell the time, and how do you compare the impact and the improvement they've had against some learners that have been developing their oracy? So that comparative data has been the real challenge, because we've asked each school to look at something very unique to their context.
Yeah, that's great.
Could I just pop in there, if that's all right? Just on a school basis, I know Sian and Dan have obviously been working in a national context and evaluations and so on, but just on school level, obviously we've done surveys and questionnaires and focus groups, and we have professional dialogue and discussion groups. As I said earlier, we'd had one with parents just a couple of weeks ago. And I think that from that, it seems very evident that staff feel empowered, and that they are inspired by the change in the learners and their enthusiasm and their engagement in learning, and that teachers also feel that the different way of working supports their well-being. And so there's a huge drive towards well-being within Wales, and that is at the heart of the new curriculum. And so as we are able to show that not only is learning being supported by this way of working, but well-being is being supported, you know, and we can evidence that, then that is giving credence to what we're doing. And then alongside that, as a school, we've been developing, and we've looked at with the OECD rubrics, and we started to develop those for each of the creative habits of mind, and looking at one for inquisitiveness and encouraging children to be involved in assessment of their own learning. And that's been really positive as well. And the local consortia for North Wales has helped us develop those into digital formats, so we can start sharing those with parents and so on. So on a school level, there are also developments and positive ways that we're starting to measure and see a difference.
Just one final point. Oh, sorry, I was just going to say there, I forgot to mention, Michael, that our external evidence is also demonstrating, and it's showing an improvement in attainment, and I think that's really important to say. We are seeing that, you know, and teachers really seeing that for themselves is really quite powerful. So I just wanted to add that one.
And attendance. And attendance also improves. It's been a huge improvement in attendance too of learners, not staff.
Yeah. So we'd love to. I tell you what, Sian, I'll do a swap with you. I reckon there's some ways to think about assessment and creativity. I'll send you something on that. If you send us your reports, we would love to put them out to our network, and our network would love it, I think.
Deal, Michael. We'll certainly do that.
That'd be fabulous. Margaret's asking, and I'm going to do these quickly, the Welsh Government appears to be separate from the Creative Schools program. So what and who inspired the setting up of the Creative Schools program?
Yeah, it's a good question, Margaret, but you know, the Welsh Government, they're not separate at all, really. They're not kind of co-delivering it with us as per se, but they are absolutely a joint funder of ours. So they do fund the programme. As Dan mentioned, we do report to them kind of on a strategic level. So we are accountable in terms of how we deliver the programme. But the original programme came about, you know, after a lot of kind of reviews around arts and education. There was a huge review looking at in all schools across Wales, and then a report of 12 recommendations was in the Welsh Government, and the then Education Minister sort of recommended them all and accepted them all, and then the sort of plan was born, if you like. and we've been living and breathing it for the last 7 years in Wales, and I can't get enough of it. So they're there, but they're kind of more as an advisory kind of role alongside the Regional Education Consortia that we work with here in Wales, and the Inspectorate as well. So I hope that answers your question.
It does.
Fabulous.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So we might just finish with Robin's question, which is about creative dispositions. Robin, did that kind of get answered, or?
I think you've really answered my question. For me, the sad thing in Australia is, even though we have some of the rhetoric around the importance of creativity for our learners, we're still pushed into using traditional, very reductive and technical assessment strategies, or those assessment strategies are being privileged by our government, whereas the range of assessment strategies that you've talked about is giving you, I think, a far wider and comprehensive view of what's really happening. And I'll be really interested to see some of the rubrics and things, around looking at the creative dispositions. And wonderful that your learners, as well as your teachers, are helping in the development of those. I think that's so exciting.
Yeah,
and that's a fabulous place, really, to finish this webinar. I mean, it's such an exciting journey that Wales is going on. We really would love you to stay in touch with us. We'd love to hear more next year or whenever. I think this will be a really well-watched YouTube replay, because everybody who needs a blueprint for how to bring creativity in the arts to the centre of their schooling system is now looking to Wales as a kind of international leader. So congratulations for all that you've done there. It's not only to Wales that you've created hope and excitement, you've created it internationally. And I think there's a lot of people here that are looking to your example with a lot of excitement. So thank you so much. I hope that the work continues from strength to strength, and all the best with your endeavours.
Yes.
Thank you so much. We really enjoyed talking to you this morning, and thank you once again for the invite. I'm very happy to continue the conversation, in terms of how this programme moves forward. So yeah, hopefully we can do that. But thank you once again for the opportunity. It's been great.
Fabulous. Thanks everyone for coming.
Thanks
you, Robin. Thank you. And to everyone who helped out, and look forward to seeing you at our next Create event. Thank very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.